Chapter 1168. Wuxia was a name that the old society master had heard so many times that his ears were about to grow calluses. It was said that Wuxia was the most outstanding young man of this generation. He had contributed greatly to the counterattack on the insect race's great secret realm, and he was the one who had facilitated the expedition to the blood refinement realm. He had also personally brought back a lot of information about the blood race from the blood refinement realm. What he brought with him was the hope of many peak spirit sea cultivators reaching the upper realm. Through him, the cultivators learned about the connection between the limits of cultivation and the foundation of the world. If it weren't for him, the old sect master would still be sitting in that useless life and death situation. However, hearing about him was one thing. The old sect master of Pillheart sect had never seen him before. On the other hand, the other two divine sea realm cultivators from the Imperial Feather sect and the Burning Heaven Path had met Wuxia once at the celebration banquet. He never expected that the one who came to support him would be this young man. However, it was said that Wuxia's cultivation was only at the 5th order spirit sea realm. Even if he could kill enemies above his realm, what could he do in this situation? Just as the old sect master was thinking about this, a cry of surprise suddenly rang out. Saint Seed! It was the blood race Saint Seed's exclamation that gave the old sect master quite a fright. A single Saint Seed was enough to put 3 9th order masters in such a difficult position. If another one were to appear, there would be no need to fight at all. Everyone would just have to wash their necks clean. However, he soon realized that something was wrong because the Saint Seed's voice was mixed with a hint of shock and fear. Immediately after, the holy seed of the blood kindred let out an angry roar. Impossible! It was as if it had seen something incomprehensible. Then, the old sect master felt that the pressure from the blood river around him had greatly decreased, and the suffocating feeling in his body had greatly weakened. He didn't know what method Wuxia had used to make the Saint Seed, which 3 9th order cultivators couldn't do anything about, so panic, but his years of cultivation and battle experience told him that the turning point of this battle had arrived. In the blood river, Wuxia had already activated his blood technique. The brilliant blood river spread out and forcefully merged with the surrounding blood river. Wuxia already had the experience of dealing with holy seeds twice, so he was very familiar with how to kill holy seeds in a more effective manner. When facing a holy seed, the first thing to do was to suppress the opponent in terms of holiness, limiting the opponent's ability to unleash its full potential. The second thing to do was to melt the opponent's blood river, leaving no room for escape. As long as the opponent's holiness was not as good as his, the opponent would be a lamb waiting to be slaughtered. After 2 engulfment and refinement, Wuxia's current holiness was so strong that he dared not say that he was at the peak. In terms of holiness, there were not many sacred seeds that could surpass him. Saint Sovereign Jade Qilin was not one of them. His holiness was on par with the female holy seed that Wuxia had killed with Jianghu and the others. He was stronger than Saint Venerable Mohai. That level of holiness wasn't considered weak among the holy seeds, but compared to Wuxia, it was still lacking. The suppression of the holiness instantly caused Saint Sovereign Jade Lin's strength to decrease greatly. The blood river was in turmoil. Seizing this opportunity, Wuxia's blood river quickly eroded over. By the time Saint Sovereign Jade Lin reacted and wanted to stop it, it was already too late. Half of the blood river had already melted, and the remaining half was entangled with each other. Inside the brilliant blood river, an undercurrent wrapped around a person and directly sent him out. It was the 9th order Emperor Feather sect cultivator who had just been seriously injured. He didn't even have time to react to what had happened before he was sent out of the battlefield. Realizing that this was probably Wuxia's doing, he couldn't help but sigh in admiration as he hurriedly fled away from the battlefield. At this moment, he was no longer in a state where he could fight. He needed to stabilize his injuries as soon as possible. Otherwise, even if the foundation of the 9 province increased greatly in the future, he might not be able to see the path to the upper realm. If that really happened, he wouldn't even have a place to cry. Inside the blood river, one person was sent out while the other was sent out, maintaining a 3 versus 1 situation. But the situation was completely different now. Whether it was the old sect master of Pillheart sect or the 9th order Burning Heaven Path cultivator, Both of them clearly noticed that the aura of the blood race holy seed was slipping, as if there was an invisible force suppressing his strength. They didn't know what kind of power this was because they couldn't feel it at all. But in the end, they were all battle veterans and immediately rushed towards Saint Sovereign Jade Lin. Originally, it was very difficult for them to accurately pinpoint the enemy's position in this blood river. Even if they occasionally found something, the other party would quickly change their position, making their efforts futile. But at this moment, there was clearly a force guiding them in the undercurrent of the blood river, pointing them to the enemy's position. They didn't need to search for the enemy, they just needed to follow this guiding force and burst out with their killing moves. While the two were attacking, Li didn't stay idle either. He pushed his sword gourd and sent out a river of sword chi towards Saint Sovereign Jade Lin. In an instant, a clear sword cry rang out. Saint Sovereign Jade Lin was about to go crazy. With his strength greatly suppressed, even if Lu Yi didn't take action, he would still be in a precarious situation. Coupled with Lu Ye's unparalleled sword chi, it only took a short while for him to be beaten to a pulp. He roared in anger and indignation. How can a trivial human possess a divine attribute? A trivial human dares to harm my holy body. Although he tried his best to push his blood technique to resist, it was to no avail. In the blood race's view, humans were pigs and dogs raised in captivity with low status. Now, a high and mighty saint seed was being beaten by a human and his life was in danger. How could he tolerate this? It was just like how a high and mighty cultivator in the 9 provinces world was beaten up by a dog. In the blood refining world, the situation was even more serious. But there was one thing that puzzled him, and that was where these humans came from. Although there were human cultivators in the territory under his rule, the cultivation of those human cultivators was not up to par. However, the human cultivators who suddenly appeared were obviously different. All of them were accomplished in their cultivation, and there were quite a number of them in the Spirit Sea realm. It was meaningless to think about this now. He realized that if he didn't think of a way to escape now, he might really die here. But at this point in the battle, it wasn't easy to escape. He used his Blood River technique to trap Pillheart Sect's old sect master and the other 2 Ninth Order realm cultivators, but now he was trapped by Lu Yi. It could only be said that what goes around comes around. Unless he could break Lu Ye's Blood River, he had no room to escape. But his saint attribute wasn't as good as Lu Ye's, so he couldn't break Lu Ye's Blood River. It was a dead end. So, he knew that he was probably doomed. His heart turned cold, and he pushed his blood technique even more crazily. Even if he died, he would drag others down with him. Pillheart Sect's old sect master and Burning Heaven Path's 9th Order realm cultivator were both artifact cultivators. At this moment, the two figures were moving back and forth around Saint Senior Jade Lin, constantly urging the power of their spirit artifacts to injure him again and again. Before Lu Yi appeared, they were extremely sullen and restrained. Now that they could finally let loose, they showed no mercy. In the fierce battle, Lu Ye's voice rang in their ears, "Be careful of his blood explosion." In such a battle, Sacred Venerate Jade Qilin had the opportunity to self-destruct, unlike the previous battle between Lu Yi and Sacred Venerate Mohai. Lu Yi had completely relied on the uniqueness of the soul-severing saber to shatter Sacred Venerate Mohai's divine soul, causing Sacred Venerate Mohai to be unable to use the blood explosion technique. The blood technique that Saint Venerable Jade Qilin was using wasn't focused on killing. Instead, it was focused on trapping. His intention was obvious. As long as he could trap anyone, he would immediately use the blood explosion technique to perish together with them. If it weren't for Lu Ye's warning, the old sect master and Saint Senior Mohai would probably be in trouble. But since he was warned, Saint Senior Jade Lin's plan would fall through. In the fierce battle, Saint Senior Jade Lin's injuries became more and more serious. Even one of his arms had been cut off. The wounds on his body were so deep that his internal organs could be vaguely seen. He had been trying to trap an enemy for a long time, but he hadn't succeeded. In the end, he sighed and the aura on his body suddenly became dangerous. Retreat. The old sect master saw that the situation wasn't good and realized that the other party might really self-destruct. While shouting, he quickly retreated. The experts of the burning sky path didn't stop either. Almost at the same time that the two of them retreated from the river of blood and saw the light of day again, a loud sound suddenly came from the river of blood, followed by extremely violent energy fluctuations that could be seen with the naked eye. The originally huge amount of blood could be seen with the naked eye. The blood river suddenly swelled up. Feeling the violent power, the two divine sea realm experts had lingering fears. If they were close enough, they would really be buried together with the blood river. The swollen blood river suddenly collapsed and shrunk. In the blink of an eye, the blood river that stretched across the sky disappeared. A young man's figure came into view. Obviously, it was Wuxia. He had a big gourd hanging on his waist. He was handsome and didn't look reckless and straightforward like a weapon cultivator. Instead, he looked unruly and confident like a sword cultivator. The old sect master and the experts of the burning sky path cupped their hands to greet him. Wuxia returned the greeting. They didn't say much. This wasn't the time to chat. The battle between the three sects against the Jade Lin Holy Land wasn't over yet. They each chose a direction and charged into the battlefield. Wuxia maintained a layer of bloody mist on the surface of his body, a sign that he was about to unleash his blood arts. He didn't go out of his way to kill his enemies. He simply wandered around the vast battlefield like a specter, but wherever he went, the vampires would fall like straw blown by the wind. All the human cultivators who were fighting the blood race cultivators in his path were surprised to find that their opponent's strength had suddenly decreased for some reason. In this kind of life-and-death battlefield, the inexplicable weakening of one side was undoubtedly fatal. The human side already had the upper hand, and with Wuxia stirring up trouble, the blood race suffered even more casualties. There were also some blood race cultivators who wanted to flee when they saw the situation wasn't good. Most of them were intercepted and killed by the human side. Only a few managed to escape. In the face of this situation, Wuxia didn't have a good solution. He couldn't intercept all the fleeing blood race cultivators. He could only try his best to kill the stronger ones. Please enter .com to view the latest update. Chapter 1169. His doppelganger took the lead, but his main body was still lying in wait. Outside the Holy Island in the Divine Gate Sea, the battle was in full swing. The Blood Tribe army had already launched an all-out attack. Although the human race's tactic of adding fuel to the fire could be considered quite covert, the vampires were still able to detect some clues. They didn't know the key points, but they knew that a long delay would bring more trouble. This battle had to be ended quickly. It was precisely because of this that the Blood Tribe army began to launch an all-out attack. This was especially true for the Eastern Front. Because the Blood Tribe's main advantage was concentrated in this direction, the battle there was particularly intense. The existence of the War Province's army could no longer be hidden. When the Blood Tribe launched their all-out attack, the War Province's army also revealed their ferocious side. They surged out from various positions and joined the defensive ranks. Thus, the Blood Tribe was surprised to find that the Jade Blood Holy Land's defenses were far stronger than before. Furthermore, there were clearly many more cultivators. This was definitely a difference of several times. This caused the Blood Tribe's originally unstoppable attack to suddenly become very anxious. The Blood Tribe didn't understand why this was happening, but they couldn't take back their fists. Since things had already gotten to this point, they could only fight head-on and determine the victor. The scene was extremely lively, and the spiritual power fluctuations became extremely chaotic. In the middle area between the two tribes, all kinds of spell techniques and streaks of light were constantly clashing. Almost at every moment, the aura of life was being annihilated. Most of them were Blood Tribe cultivators. After all, the human side had the geographical advantage of defending. Furthermore, the human side had a large number of medical cultivators on standby at all times. Whenever a cultivator was severely injured, they would immediately rush back to treat them. The Blood Tribe didn't have this advantage. Furthermore, once they were struck into the Divine Gate Sea, they would basically be killed. At a glance, the Blood Tribe's corpses were falling into the Divine Gate Sea amidst the streaks of light that blotted out the sky and earth. Although the Blood Tribe had suffered heavy casualties, they still had a certain advantage in the overall situation. This was because the Blood Tribe had mobilized far too many troops to attack the Jade Blood Holy Land this time. The most obvious situation was that the range of the human side's defensive line was shrinking bit by bit. This was a sign that the spell techniques were being suppressed. There was nothing they could do about it. The human race was divided into various factions, and Dharma cultivation was only one of them. Thus, in a defensive battle like this, only Dharma cultivation could exert force from a distance. However, the blood race was different. Every member of the blood race was a combination of a body cultivator and a magic cultivator. All of them were skilled in blood arts. If it weren't for the fact that the human race could draw support from the formations they had set up in advance, they would have been defeated long ago. As if they had seen hope, the blood race army's attacks became even more ferocious. Outside of the main battlefield outside the Saint Island, there were many sub-battlefields that belonged to the top human powerhouses and the holy seeds. This time, there were about 30 saint seeds participating in the encirclement of the Jade Blood Holy Land. The number of saint seeds was beyond imagination. Although it was impossible to say that all the saint seeds in the southern territory of the blood refining world were here, at least 70 to 80% of them were present. As a result, the human race had no choice but to send out more top powerhouses to deal with them. Otherwise, the human race would inevitably suffer heavy casualties if the saint seeds were to free themselves. Everywhere in the sky, many blood rivers were spread out, and the scene was spectacular. Fierce fighting sounds came from the blood rivers. These were all the sub-battlefields of the top human powerhouses and the holy seeds. This kind of tacit understanding between soldiers and generals had been maintained for decades, and this time was no exception. Under such a situation, a figure rushed out of the main battlefield. With the support of the concealment and aura concealment spiritual inscriptions, he quietly swept toward a huge blood river. In such a chaotic situation, no one would pay special attention to such a figure. Even if he didn't have the support of the concealment and aura concealment spiritual inscriptions, it wouldn't matter. The holy seeds that were controlling the blood rivers to fight fiercely with the human powerhouses probably didn't expect that there would be such a person in this world who specifically targeted existences like them and had the ability to deal with them. Lu Ye's choice of target was not random but targeted. He was not targeting a certain holy seed but the opponent of the holy seed. If he wanted to kill the holy seed more effectively and quickly, he had to choose a good helper. Jianghu was undoubtedly a suitable candidate. Sword cultivators were strong in killing and had explosive power. Especially for a top sword cultivator like Jianghu, as long as he could create the right opportunity, Jianghu would be able to kill with one strike. So before Jianghu made his move, Lu Ye had been watching his movements, and they had communicated with each other. In the blood river, the sound of swords was endless. Even with the thick blood covering, one could vaguely see the sharp sword light bursting out. Obviously, Jianghu was using the sword cultivator's means to fight with a certain holy seed. Under normal circumstances, Jianghu would not be so reckless. Fighting with the holy seed in the blood river was an extremely unwise choice. He would roam outside the blood river, looking for the enemy's weakness and opportunity to attack, and at the same time weaken the enemy's blood river. But if he wanted to cooperate with Lu Ye, then he had to enter the blood river. The holy seed that was fighting with Jianghu was secretly happy. It felt that Jianghu had lost his mind this time and allowed it to have the geographical advantage. With the help of the blood river, how could it lose? It could even say that as long as it had enough time, it was confident that it could kill Jianghu. It was in such anticipation that it suddenly noticed a strange aura intruding into its blood river. Wherever the blood river was, it was within the range of its perception, so it immediately knew that the intruder was a fifth-order Divine Sea Realm human cultivator. To be honest, it did not put such a human cultivator in its eyes at all. It could kill him with a wave of its hand, and with a single thought, a blood all would form in the blood river, ready to take the human's life. But in the next moment, its mind suddenly shook, and even the blood river began to ripple. It was because a powerful divine attribute, so strong that it made it somewhat nervous, suddenly burst out with the intrusion of this human. For a moment, its mind became unstable, and the blood all it condensed collapsed. It could not understand how a human could have such a powerful divine attribute. There was no need for him to figure it out. The moment Lu Ye's divine attribute erupted and suppressed the holy seed's bloodline, causing its strength to plummet, the many sword lights drifting around the holy seed suddenly burst out with dazzling light and gathered in the middle. Jianghu had been waiting for this moment. The sword lights drifting in the blood river seemed to be unintentional, but in fact, it was all for this moment. If the holy seed's strength was not suppressed, it would not have been easy for him to do this, because the power of the blood river would have prevented the sword lights from converging. But when Lu Yi appeared and the holy seed was suppressed, the blocking power was greatly reduced, so Jianghu knew that his chance had come. The countless sword lights rapidly rotated as they converged, wrapping the holy seed in the blink of an eye. In an instant, the holy seed seemed to be wrapped in a wheel of swords. Under the sharp sword chi, even the holy seed's powerful physique could not block it. This was the terrifying killing power of a top sword cultivator. To a certain extent, sword cultivators had a considerable degree of restraint over body cultivators, because the violent lethality of a sword cultivator could break through the physical defenses that body cultivators were proud of. The biggest shortcoming of a sword cultivator was their lack of endurance, because their killing moves were explosive and consumed a lot of their foundation. So, the wisest way to deal with a sword cultivator was to fight a battle of attrition. Once it became a battle of attrition, the power that the sword cultivator could use would become weaker and weaker, and it would be difficult for them to win. But at the same level of cultivation, how many people could fight a sword cultivator to a battle of attrition? A few flying swords would leave a few holes in their body. If they could rely on treasures, they might be able to withstand the sharpness of the flying swords. However, the blood race would never rely on treasures because their blood arts were extremely corrosive. Any treasures in their hands would not be able to display their full potential. In the entire blood refinement realm, the level of weapon refinement was simply unsightly. This was because no blood race would study the art of weapon refinement. Even the human cultivators living in the blood refinement realm were influenced by the blood race. They were not so passionate about weapon refinement. At most, they could make some simple weapons. The rotating sword will cut off the saint seed's flesh inch by inch. In the blink of an eye, the saint seed was almost reduced to a skeleton. He was not dead yet. The vitality of the blood cultivators was very strong, and although such an injury was extremely serious, as long as he was given enough time to recover, he could still recover. But he would never have such an opportunity. Two figures had already rushed towards him, one in front and one behind. They arrived at his position almost at the same time. Lu Yi unsheathed the mountain-ascending saber at his waist and slashed at the saint seed's neck. A sharp sword also appeared in Jianghu hand and stabbed towards his opponent's heart. Under the powerful bloodline suppression, the strength that the saint seed could display was equivalent to that of an ordinary ninth-order divine sea realm cultivator at best. Facing such a pincer attack, how could he block it? The great crisis of life and death, coupled with the excruciating pain, made him unsure of which attack to block for a moment. He wanted to block from both sides, but in the end he couldn't block from either side. Lu Ye's figure brushed past him, and his saber cut off his neck. Jianghu sword pierced his chest, and a violent force instantly erupted from the sword, blowing a huge hole in his chest. The powerful impact sent his head flying high. The saint seed's aura was instantly extinguished, and the blood river collapsed. And among the pieces of flesh that exploded out of his chest, there was a very conspicuous golden light. It was his saint blood. The saint blood refined by the saint seed was generally stored in one's heart. It was the blood of the saint seed's heart. It was an existence higher than one's own blood essence, and also the foundation of the saint seed. Jianghu sword that pierced the heart happened to draw out this drop of saint blood. The confrontation happened in a flash. From the time Lu Yi broke into the blood river to when he and Jianghu worked together to kill the saint seed, only 3 breaths had passed. Chapter 1170. In just 3 breaths of time, a high and mighty saint seed had fallen. Lu Yi couldn't help but sigh, choosing a good helper was extremely important. His clone had 2 helpers before, but it had also taken a long time to defeat the enemy. In contrast, Jianghu side was much simpler. The huge blood river suddenly shrank, and even the golden blood that had burst out before was absorbed into Lu Ye's body. Only a decapitated corpse with missing flesh and blood fell from the sky. Jianghu glanced over at Lu Ye, unable to conceal the surprise in his heart, because he had never expected this battle to be so simple and easy, even if Lu Ye had told him about it before. A few months ago, Lu Ye had helped him, Wu Chang, Wei Fufeng, and the others to kill a female holy seed. But that battle had been very difficult, and it had taken a lot of effort for them to force the female holy seed to the point of self-destruction. But this time, it was just a killing blow, and his opponent was completely defenseless. If Jianghu hadn't personally experienced the strength of Lu Ye's opponent before he appeared, he would have suspected that he had killed a saint seed. He vaguely understood some of the key points and realized that Lu Ye had a special method that could suppress the saint seeds and cause their strength to plummet. If this was the case, then today's biggest obstacle would no longer be a threat. Even though Jianghu sword heart was firm, he couldn't help feeling a little happy at this moment. After a short pause, the 2 of them rushed towards the nearest blood river and dove into it in the blink of an eye. It was unknown which old senior was fighting with the saint seed here, but the power of the blood river was too strong, making it impossible to sense his aura. However, the commotion caused by the battle was quite big. After entering the blood river, Lu Ye didn't immediately use his blood secret art. He needed to wait for Jianghu to make preparations. In his field of vision, a peerless sword chi suddenly spread out, and even the rich blood color of the blood river couldn't stop it. Sword chi shuttled through the blood river like fish and converged in a certain direction. Only a moment later, Jianghu voice sounded, "Little Lu Ye." Lu Ye had been waiting for this moment, and hearing this, he didn't hesitate to open his blood river. What happened next was simple. Suddenly being suppressed, this holy seed behaved exactly the same as the previous one. The blood river trembled, and its mind was thrown into chaos. Its strength abruptly fell. Jianghu saw a good opportunity. A sword will formed from countless sword lights spun out. The other senior also unleashed his killer move at the right time. It was not that he had been warned beforehand, he was just reacting according to the situation. He had a perfect grasp of the situation. After a short while, the saint seed's aura was annihilated, and the blood river dispersed, revealing 3 figures. Only then did Lu Ye see the old senior's face clearly. It was a body cultivator called Wu Dezhao. The old senior's eyes widened in disbelief. What's going on? He couldn't understand how such a powerful holy seed could be so easily killed by him and Jianghu. It didn't even seem to have a chance to fight back. Don't ask. Follow me. Jianghu was too lazy to explain too much to him. With a turn of his sword, he charged into the distance. Lu Ye followed closely behind him. Wu Dezhao's heart was itching. He was certain that Jianghu had grasped some secret method to quickly kill a holy seed. He naturally had to figure it out as soon as possible. He also hastily chased after him, shouting, "Hey, just what's going on?" Seeing that Jianghu was ignoring him, he chased after Lu Ye and slapped him on the shoulder, almost sending him into the divine gate sea. "Brat, tell me." Lu Ye could only give him a simple explanation. Wu Dezhao's eyes began to shine. If he hadn't personally experienced it, he really might not have believed it. A holy seed was so powerful that it could be easily suppressed. But now that he had personally experienced it, he knew Lu Ye was telling the truth. He immediately knew that the blood race's so-called holy seeds were about to suffer greatly in this battle. He couldn't help but sigh. The blood race's success and failure were both due to their bloodline. Because of their bloodline inheritance, their growth was much easier than the human race's. Furthermore, they were naturally proficient in many blood arts. That was an advantage that the human race couldn't compare to. Furthermore, holy seeds had absolute control over ordinary blood race members. But it was precisely because of the difference in bloodlines that this race had a fatal weakness. Under normal circumstances, this weakness wouldn't be exploited by humans. That was because only holy seeds possessed a holy nature. But now, a fellow had appeared on the human race's side who could exploit this weakness. If the blood race's holy seed didn't die, who would? These old seniors had been fighting the vampire holy seed for decades, but apart from the holy lord Feng Wujiang, who had killed a holy seed, only Jianghu and a few others had done so recently. No one else had done so. Who wouldn't want to kill a holy seed? Wu Dezhao naturally didn't want to miss such a heaven-sent opportunity. He followed closely behind Lu Yi. In the blink of an eye, 3 figures plunged into a river of blood. Moments later, the river of blood collapsed, and the 3 figures turned into 4. Wu Dezhao, who was beside Lu Yi, had a pleased expression on his face. This time, he acted quickly and smashed the holy seed's head before the others could do anything. This added a thick stroke to his record of killing a holy seed. The group had expanded again, making killing the holy seed even easier. Not to mention Lu Ye's holy nature suppressing the holy seed, even if it wasn't, just the fact that the top masters of the human race had rushed into the blood river was enough to make the holy seed lose its composure. The holy seed was indeed powerful, but it couldn't deal with too many people at once. Moreover, using this method to kill the holy seed didn't require too many people. Lu Yi only needed Jianghu to cooperate with him. The other top experts who were free could join the main battlefield. Without the holy seed restraining them, each of them could unleash their full power and inflict heavy casualties on the blood race army. That was what all the seniors were doing. Only Wu Dezhao was thick-skinned enough to stay by Lu Ye's side, saying that he was there to protect Lu Yi. In truth, he just wanted to kill a few more holy seeds to satisfy his craving. Lu Yi couldn't refuse, and Jianghu couldn't be bothered to say anything. Moreover, as he killed more and more holy seeds on the main battlefield, more and more top human experts could be sent to reinforce him. Wu Dezhao wasn't a big deal. The situation on the main battlefield had completely stabilized. Those top experts who were free to join the battle played a crucial role. This was especially true of the spell cultivators. The spells they unleashed were so powerful that every single one of them could inflict huge losses on the blood race army. One could foresee that as the situation developed, the humans on the main battlefield would slowly gain the upper hand and expand it. Lu Yi, Jianghu and Wu Dezhao were still busy running around the battlefield. Since Lu Yi joined the fray, more than 10 saint seeds had been slain in just 2 hours. That was almost half of the saint seeds in the blood race's camp. The duration of each battle was very short, and most of them were still on the move. There was still some distance between the various battlefields, mainly because of the holy seed's holiness. The holy seed's holiness varied in strength, so they couldn't get too close to avoid interfering with each other. They had to keep a certain distance if they wanted to unleash their full strength. This gave the trio a good opportunity to take them down one by one. Due to the distance, it was very difficult for the other holy seeds to notice the fall of a holy seed. However, Lu Yi could sense that this good thing wouldn't last for too long. The holy seeds weren't fools. With so many holy seeds falling, the situation on the main battlefield had changed drastically. With so many top experts active, the remaining holy seeds would surely notice something. At that time, they would only need to pay a little attention to find out what was going on. They hadn't noticed it yet because they hadn't realized this problem at all. In the middle of the battle, the trio once again charged into a river of blood, preparing to process the holy seeds here just like before. Moments later, Jianghu had finished his preparations, Wu Dezhao was ready, and Lu Yi activated the river of blood. However, the next moment he frowned. He had walked too much at night, and in the end he still encountered a ghost. The holy seed here had a much stronger holiness than him. His river of blood not only failed to suppress the other party, but was also suppressed by the other party. Lu Yi had considered this situation before. Although he had refined the holy blood of 2 holy seeds because of the talent tree, he wasn't naive enough to think that his holiness was the strongest in the entire blood refinement world. As the saying went, there was always someone better than you. The blood refinement world had existed for so many years, and there were always holy seeds that were blessed by nature and refined more holy blood. In comparison, his holiness was indeed very strong in the blood refinement world. The fall of the holy seeds was the best proof. Compared to the one in front of him, there was still a big gap. Of course, Lu Yi had accumulated a large amount of holy blood in his body, which was all left behind by the dead holy seeds. If he refined all the holy blood, he would be the only holy seed in the blood refinement world. He was also trying his best to refine it, but the time was still short, and it was difficult to make any breakthrough. The trio's cooperation was already very skillful. Noticing the movement on Lu Ye's side, Jianghu and Wu Dezhao both used their killing moves. However, to their surprise, they didn't kill the holy seed this time. Although the sudden burst of power made the other party a little embarrassed, the other party was still fine. Therefore, Jianghu and Wu Dezhao understood that they had encountered the tough nut that Lu Yi had mentioned before. The two didn't hesitate. While the holy seed was stunned, they immediately swayed and left the river of blood. Before Wu Dezhao left, he didn't forget to take Lu Yi with him. Since he said he would protect Lu Ye's safety, he naturally had to put on an act. Chapter 1171. This was the best time to quickly kill the saint seeds. The trio didn't want to waste time here. Instead of fighting with a saint seed whose saint attribute was so strong that even Lu Yi couldn't suppress it, they might as well find a soft persimmon to pinch. "What are you doing?" From inside the blood river, an old human race senior's puzzled voice rang out. He couldn't understand why Jianghu and Wu Dezhao had come in to take a look and then ran out. This wasn't Immortal market. Without getting any response at all, the three of them had already rushed to the next battlefield. Inside the blood river, the saint seed's expression became both surprised and dignified, because the moment Lu Yi activated the blood river, he couldn't ignore the saint attribute that was displayed. A human race cultivator actually had such a strong saint attribute. It was unheard of. Among the holy seeds that were sent out on this expedition, other than the one that he could suppress, only the other two holy seeds could be slightly comparable. The rest of the holy seeds were inferior. He suddenly had a bad feeling. He quickly spread out his divine sense to monitor the surroundings, and the situation he discovered shocked him. Because the saint attribute was on the right, and the human race had already gained the upper hand on the main battlefield and was counterattacking. The thing he was most worried about had happened. When he noticed that Lu Yi had saint attribute, he realized that the human race was taking advantage of it to hunt down the saint seeds. He thought that since there wasn't much time left, even if the saint seeds were lost, the losses wouldn't be too great. But the real situation was far worse than he imagined. Those three had already rushed to the nearby saint seeds. The saint seeds there were definitely unable to resist the powerful saint attribute of the human race. When the time came, with the help of the human race's top masters, they wouldn't have long to live. Presumably, those three were using this method to defeat the saint seeds one by one, causing huge losses to the human race. His eyes almost popped out of their sockets. If he had reacted too slowly, he would have used the blood river to trap those three. The human race cultivator with saint attribute was only a fifth-order divine sea realm cultivator. If he had used his full strength, he might have been able to kill him. But at that time, he was so shocked that he didn't think of this at all. By the time he reacted, the human race had already escaped the range of the blood river. There was no way to continue this battle. The human race had actually hidden a trump card against the holy seeds, which had already brought immeasurable losses to their side. If they continued to fight, not many of the holy seeds would survive. Once the holy seed level was lost, it would be futile no matter how much of an advantage they gained on the main battlefield. In fact, their losses were already close to collapsing. They didn't have the advantage on the main battlefield, and nearly half of their saint seeds had been killed or injured. This operation to encircle the blue blood holy land had already failed. He needed to conserve his strength as much as possible. He didn't care about the deaths of the ordinary blood breeds, but the deaths of the holy seeds couldn't be made up in a short time. Even the blood breeds in the divine ocean realm couldn't grow so easily. With a single thought, the saint seed of the vampires made a decision. Continuous howls rang out, and the howls radiated throughout the entire battlefield. All the blood breeds who heard this whistle were stunned, because this was clearly a signal to retreat. In such a fierce battle, suddenly retreating wasn't a wise decision. When two armies faced off, there would definitely be casualties. Even if one side had the upper hand, It wouldn't be so easy to completely defeat the other side. They would have to pay a huge price. But if one side suddenly retreated, the other side would probably laugh their heads off. That was because a pursuit was the best time to maximize the results of the battle. The Holy Seeds had been fighting with the Blue Blood Holy Land for decades. Even if they didn't have any battle experience before, they should have known the drawbacks of ordering a retreat. Unless there was an irresistible factor, all the Holy Seeds who were still alive hurriedly spread out their divine senses to check their surroundings. The next moment, their expressions changed drastically. They had been fighting with their opponents and didn't have the time to be distracted. Also, they thought that the battle hadn't been going on for long, so there shouldn't be any decisive changes in the situation. But the reality of the situation made them all feel as if they had fallen into an ice cellar. No one knew what had happened, but it was a fact that the Holy Seeds' auras had suddenly decreased by a lot. Therefore, the surviving Holy Seeds knew that there was a power they had overlooked that was rapidly killing off the Holy Seeds. The Holy Seeds had always been high and mighty. Be it their bloodline or strength, they were the best in this world. They wouldn't be at a disadvantage even when facing the old seniors of the human race. If they relied on the blood river, they could even fight one against many for a short period of time. But if there really was such a power that could quickly kill them, then everything they relied on would pale in comparison. And without such a thing to rely on, it was only natural that they would panic. Therefore, after noticing the situation on the battlefield, almost all of the vampire Holy Seeds made a decision at the same time. They gathered the river of blood and fled. The top human experts who were fighting with them naturally chased after them. How could the ordinary blood breeds hold on when the Holy Seeds had fled? After a moment of panic, the vast army scattered. On the main battlefield, the human army was dumbfounded. Everyone knew that it was impossible for the human race to lose this war. With the addition of the army from the War Province, the defense of the Holy Land was not that easy to break through. It was only a matter of time before they won. However, the Blood Race army was huge, and it was not that easy to destroy them. But who would have thought the Blood Race would make such a decision at such a time? How long had it been since the battle began? It had only been a little over 2 hours since the Blood Race launched their general attack, and the Holy Seeds and top human experts entered the fray. Yet, the Blood Race army was already retreating? In past battles, the two sides had only exchanged blows and probed each other. It wasn't time to reveal their true strength yet. It could be said that this was an unimaginably short battle. After a brief moment of astonishment, furious roars rang out from all over the Holy Island's defensive perimeter. In summary, there was only one order: kill. The armament cultivators and physique cultivators who had nothing to do for a long time were the first to rush out. In the previous confrontation between the two armies, they really couldn't intervene. At most, they urged their spiritual power to replenish the energy of the array on the defensive line. For the armament cultivators and physique cultivators who were used to close combat, this was simply a kind of torture. They had originally thought that they would have room to display their abilities once the enemy approached a certain distance. Who would have thought that Lu Yi would kill so many saints? After the old seniors joined the battle, the Blood Race army actually showed signs of being suppressed, and they had even less of a chance to make a move. They had traveled hundreds of millions of kilometers from the 9 states to the Blood Refinement realm to participate in such a large-scale battle. They couldn't just be spectators, could they? Every weapon cultivator, body cultivator, and even ghost cultivator had long been thirsty. Thus, when the order to pursue and kill was given, they were the fastest and fiercest. To them, the fleeing figures of the Blood Tribe were not just enemies from another world, but also a group of walking war achievements. Who wouldn't be jealous? Thankfully, the cultivators were all in groups of 3 to 5, and they were using the spirit of unity formation plates to form a formation. All of a sudden, what pounced out of the small islands on the outskirts of the Holy Island were not human figures at all. Instead, it was a series of ferocious beast projections that were linked together by a series of formations. It was as if an invisible ancient door had been opened, and the ancient vicious beasts broke out of the gate. Those vicious beast phantoms were all different. There were also some that weren't vicious beast phantoms, but condensed into the shape of sabers, swords, hammers, and so on. They looked strange and fierce. In terms of speed, the blood race had the advantage because almost every blood race cultivator who had reached a certain level of cultivation could use the blood escape technique. The blood escape technique's speed was one of the fastest among all escape techniques. It could even be used to escape at a critical moment. Therefore, under the premise of the same realm, if the blood race wanted to escape, the human cultivators might not have any good ideas. Below, the scene was a scene of formations formed in the late Dodo era. It was also at this moment that the human cultivators formed one formation after another. The figure of the great Tao cut into the camp of the blood clan like a crackling wave, rolling up. What followed was a boundless slaughter. In an instant, a large portion of the blood race camp's border was melted away, and countless blood race cultivators died. After waiting bitterly for a long time, the weapon cultivators, body cultivators, and ghost cultivators could finally fight without restraint. Each of them was like a ferocious tiger descending the mountain, unstoppable. Saber light and sword light intertwined with spell technique attacks, harvesting the enemies in all directions to their heart's content. On the outer defensive perimeter of the Holy Island, Feng Wujiang's figure stood in the air, not knowing whether to laugh or cry at this dramatic scene. He hadn't gone out to fight because he needed to stay here and oversee the situation. Cultivation. The overall situation. The human cultivators from the blood sacred land all charged out together. The cultivators of the blood sacred land all looked at Feng Wujiang with anticipation, waiting for the Holy Lord's order. Feng Wujiang sensed their emotions and said, "Then let's kill to our heart's content." In any case, based on the current situation, there was no need for any forces to stay behind. As soon as he finished speaking, cheers rang out, and the cultivators of the blood sacred land all charged out. Only some medical cultivators and injured cultivators remained on the small island. The medical cultivators had to stay here to treat the injured cultivators at any time and try their best to preserve the strength of the human race. The injured cultivators were forced to do so. They were injured in the previous battle, so they naturally couldn't attack rashly. However, there were also some who didn't care. After all, if they missed such a grand event, they might not have the chance to make up for it in their lifetime. A cultivator who was almost wrapped up like a dumpling struggled to get up. Wuxia, who was treating other cultivators, turned to look at him and smiled sweetly. "Fellow Taoist, what are you going to do?" The cultivator raised his arm and said, "I can still fight." Wuxia decisively raised her hand and pointed at him. "No, you can't." The cultivator who got up with difficulty immediately fell down weakly. For a moment, his eyes and mouth were slanted, and his face was covered with a layer of green. Wuxia turned to look at the person who was being treated with a smile. "Fellow Taoist, you seem to have something to say just now?" The cultivator immediately shook his head like a rattledrum. "No, I don't want to say anything." Chapter 1172. Another huge river of blood that stretched across the sky collapsed, revealing the figures of Lu Yi, Jianghu, and Wu Dezhao. With a glance, the situation in the field was clear at a glance. The blood race was defeated faster than expected. Obviously, it was the result of the holy seed that let out the howling sound. "Chase!" Lu Yi shouted in a low voice. He directly burst out a drop of essence blood and activated the blood escape technique. He turned into a bloody light and chased forward. This was a rare opportunity. He had to kill as many holy seeds as possible. If these holy seeds really fled, it would not be easy to find them. Jianghu's figure flashed and wrapped his body in sword light. In terms of speed, he was even faster than Lu Yi. Wu Dezhao was puffing and puffing as he chased after them. Although his speed was slow, he was still left far behind by Lu Yi and Jianghu. He couldn't help but curse and turn around to vent his anger on the nearby blood race. For a while, the wind and water were stirred up. When the human army chased, they caused unimaginable casualties to the blood race. In less than an hour, the blood race's casualties exceeded the total before, and such casualties continued to increase. The holy seeds were the strongest and the fastest, so they fled at the front. Behind them were the blood race in the divine sea realm. As for the blood race below the Divine Sea realm, they had already abandoned them. If they could escape, it was their fortune. All the blood race had a premonition that after this battle, it would be difficult for the southern border of the blood race to form a large-scale organization that could resist the holy land of Jade blood for many years. This made them feel extremely pained and resentful. This was because this battle was really a mess. They thought that they could eliminate the holy land of Jade blood, but in the end, they suffered heavy losses. Nearly half of the holy seeds were killed or injured. This was definitely the greatest loss that the blood race had suffered in the history of the blood race. Fortunately, more than half of the holy seeds escaped. As long as they were still alive, the ordinary blood race were dead. Just as the holy seeds were thinking that they had escaped the calamity, many figures suddenly appeared in front of them. Ever since the cultivators of the 9 regions invaded the blood refining world, the entire blood refining world had been covered by dark clouds, muffled thunder, and dim light. It concealed the movements of the 9 regions cultivator army. When the holy seeds focused their vision, they were horrified to discover that it was the human clan's army that was approaching them. They were majestic and aggressive, and there were huge treasure ships that they had never seen before in the army formation. The holy seeds were completely stunned. No one knew where these human race cultivators had come from, just as they couldn't understand why the defensive power of the Jade Blood Holy Land had suddenly increased. After all, a cross-realm expedition was too mysterious. The 9 regions had already prepared for it, and they knew everything about the blood refining world. However, the blood refining world knew nothing about the 9 regions. While the holy seeds were still in a daze, the human army had already launched an attack. The 8 armies had been rushing for a long time, and along the way, they had been inquiring about the situation in the Jade Blood Holy Land through different channels, so they had a considerable understanding of the current situation. According to the original plan, they would rush outside the Jade Blood Holy Land and cooperate with the forces of the Holy Land to surround the blood race. However, the plan couldn't keep up with the changes. The blood race's performance this time was just barely satisfactory. Excluding the initial probing time, they were completely defeated after more than 2 hours of formal confrontation. Naturally, some changes had to be made to the original plan, but fortunately, the general direction wouldn't change. At this moment, they finally saw the blood race that they had heard about for a long time, so what else was there to say? Naturally, the courageous would emerge victorious. One spell technique after another erupted with a loud rumble, and one treasure ship after another erupted with dazzling light, venting it on the fleeing blood tribe camp to their heart's content. In the army, the 9th Order Divine Sea Realm cultivators weren't in a hurry to make a move. They had a more important task, which was to entangle the fleeing holy seeds. They had never come into contact with the blood race before, so they couldn't determine which holy seed was an ordinary blood race based on their power. Holy seeds were also in the Divine Sea Realm. However, it was different with Lu Ye's experience. They only needed to keep an eye on the fastest blood race that was still alone. Because of the holy seed's own holy nature, ordinary blood race would subconsciously stay away from them to avoid being suppressed by the holy nature. Suppression. This caused every holy seed to be isolated. Based on this judgment, the 9th Order Divine Sea Realm cultivators in the army easily found their targets. In an instant, one figure after another rushed towards the saint seeds. Almost every holy seed was surrounded by at least 4 or 5 9th Order Divine Sea Realm cultivators. As soon as they started fighting, the masters of the 9 provinces noticed that the holy seeds were extraordinary. Originally, they thought that the holy seeds were no match for them. In fact, it wouldn't be a problem for them to suppress the holy seeds. However, after the holy seeds spread out their blood river, even if they were outnumbered, they could only be in a stalemate. In some places, they were even at a disadvantage. None of them had fought against the blood race before. After experiencing the treacherous blood river, they understood the power of the blood race's holy seeds. The cultivators of the 8 armies came from 8 different directions, intercepting the fleeing blood race. The War Province Army and the cultivators of the Jade Blood Holy Land chased after them. For a time, the sky above the Divine Gate Sea, with the Jade Blood Holy Land as the center, was filled with endless battles. The casualties of the blood race continued to increase. They were the ones who were fleeing. If they weren't intercepted from the front, perhaps most of the blood race would have been able to escape. However, they were intercepted in the middle of the chase, so there was no way out. They could only fight to the death. However, at this moment, the morale of the blood race army had long been scattered. It was impossible for them to reorganize into a force strong enough to fight another battle. On the other hand, the 9-province army's morale was strong. After a short exchange of blows, the difference between the two sides was obvious. Lu Yi and Jianghu chased for a long time and finally caught up with the fleeing holy seeds. They didn't know which province's army was in charge of this direction, but when the two arrived, they saw 3 huge blood rivers in the sky at a glance. From the power radiating from the blood rivers, there was no doubt that they belonged to the holy seeds. The holy seeds also wanted to run, but at this moment, each of them had to deal with at least 4 or 5 ninth-order Divine Sea Realm cultivators. How could they just run away? Especially since these 9th-order Divine Sea Realm cultivators had already received news from Lu Yi through various channels. They only focused on trapping the enemy and didn't fight head-on. Angry shouts and exclamations came from one of the blood rivers. It was unknown which 9th-order Divine Sea Realm cultivator was so excited, but from the shouts and exclamations, it was obvious that they didn't have any advantage. Lu Yi and Jianghu figures flickered, and they crashed straight into the blood rivers. A moment later, with a burst of shocking sword light, the blood rivers suddenly collapsed, revealing the figures in the blood rivers. The 9th-order Divine Sea Realm cultivators were still in a daze. None of them had expected that they would be killed so suddenly after joining forces against such a difficult enemy. Someone with sharp eyes saw a familiar figure and immediately shouted, "Lu Yi!" They also saw Jianghu next to Lu Yi, but no one recognized him. They vaguely knew that this was probably the old senior Lu Yi had mentioned before. Secretly marveling at the fact that Jianghu was worthy of being a character who had once suppressed an era. The strength of this person who killed the holy seeds was truly extraordinary. What they didn't know was that Jianghu being able to kill the holy seeds so quickly was inseparable from Lu Ye's assistance. In fact, when Lu Yi rushed into the blood rivers and used his blood technique to suppress the holy seeds, even the few of them had the ability to kill the holy seeds. It was just that Jianghu sword was too fast and didn't give them a chance to experience it. In the blink of an eye, Lu Yi and Jianghu had rushed into the second blood rivers. The holy seeds had already sensed that something was wrong and were frantically trying to escape. However, when they saw their opponent's pot, they were completely doomed. Looking around, in the blink of an eye, 3 holy seeds in this direction had been killed. Lu Yi didn't know if there were only 3 holy seeds in this direction, or if some lucky holy seeds had already escaped, but there was no point in thinking about it at this moment. Even if a holy seed really escaped, he didn't have the time to chase after it. With the 3 holy seeds in this position dead, the rest only needed to be handed over to the cultivator corps in charge of this area. Eliminating the remnants of the blood race army in this direction was only a matter of time. Lu Yi and Jianghu figures flickered as they cut across horizontally. A voice came from afar, "I wish you all good luck and great gains." The 9th-order Divine Sea Realm cultivators looked at his departing figure, and some shook their heads and laughed. This little brat. They were truly envious. At such a young age, he had a bright future ahead of him, and he could do whatever he wanted. Although these 9th-order Divine Sea Realm cultivators were high and mighty, at Lu Ye's age, they were only at the True Lake Realm at most, and some were only at the Cloud River Realm. In comparison, the gap was huge. The cultivator corps of the 9 states continued to encircle and annihilate the remnants of the blood race army. The fleeing blood race thought that they could escape, but who knew that they would run into an inescapable net? At this moment, none of the blood race had the mind to find out where these human cultivators came from. If they wanted to live, they could only fight with all they had, trying to tear apart the human core's formation and carve out a path of blood. However, the cultivators of the core had come from afar, and all of them were full of fighting spirit. Even if the blood race were cornered beasts, they weren't afraid. Killing a blood race member would give them an extra merit, and this was something that the cultivators could still calculate. Coupled with the popularity of the twin chi-connected spirit array, the cultivators were able to form an array with their companions. The damage they could cause in battle and the defense they could form was far stronger than if they fought alone. In such a situation, the human race easily gained an absolute advantage. But in the end, people would die in war. The human side had also suffered losses, but compared to the casualties of the blood race, these losses were almost negligible. Chapter 1173. In this head-on clash between the humans and the blood breeds, the initial probing took less than 2 days, and the head-on confrontation only took more than 2 hours. However, the subsequent pursuit took 5 to 6 days. After this battle, countless corpses and blood were buried in the Divine Gate Sea. The blood breeds' army was almost completely annihilated. Other than a few lucky blood breeds who managed to escape, the rest were either killed by the human cultivators or fell into the Divine Gate Sea. There was no chance of survival if they fell into the Divine Gate Sea. There were more than 30 holy seeds, but only 6 or 7 of them managed to escape. Other than the first few who were killed by Lu Yi, Jianghu Hong, and Wu Dezhao, the rest were the result of Lu Yi and Jianghu Hong's pursuit. Of course, they also benefited from the entanglement of the human cultivators in all directions. Chasing them down consumed too much energy and was a waste of time. After all, the holy seeds escaped in more than one direction. Lu Yi and Jianghu Hong had to rush to the next direction after killing them in one direction. It was very tiring. At the end of the chase, both he and Jianghu Hong were somewhat exhausted. They did not do their best. In the end, some of the holy seeds still managed to escape. They were helpless, but there was nothing they could do. The holy seeds were all very powerful. In addition, it was the first time the cultivators of the 9 states came into contact with the blood arts of the blood breeds. They were not familiar with many things, so it was inevitable that they would overlook some things. The only thing that Lu Yi felt was a pity was that the holy seed whose holiness was much stronger than his had also managed to escape. However, although the holy seed's holiness was much stronger than Lu Ye's, it might not be the case the next time they met. After killing so many holy seeds, Lu Yi collected all the holy blood of the slain holy seeds. As long as he could refine this holy blood, his holiness would definitely increase exponentially. At that time, it would not be an exaggeration to say that he would be the person with the strongest holiness in the blood refinement world. Lu Yi did not think that any holy seed's holiness would be stronger than his after refining all the holy blood. After all, even the holy seeds had to take some risks in the process of refining the holy blood. There was a limit to the growth of their holiness. On the other hand, he could use the incineration of the talent tree without any hidden dangers. He could refine the holy blood. At this time, the 9 armies of the military province gathered at the Jade Blood Holy Land. They were mainly here to rest and reorganize. After several days of fighting, the cultivators were more or less tired. They had no place to stand on the Divine Gate Sea, so they could only come to the Jade Blood Holy Land. For a time, the Holy Island and the surrounding defensive islands were packed with people. Since the establishment of the Jade Blood Holy Land, there had never been so many human race cultivators gathered here, and all of them possessed extraordinary strength. Apart from the repairs, it was also a large-scale meeting. Needless to say, the sects that had their own seniors in the Holy Land all gladly came to visit their old ancestors and received a lot of encouragement. Those sects that didn't have their own seniors in the Holy Land didn't need to pay their respects to the patriarchs, but since they were guests from afar, they had to pay their respects to the owner of this place. As early as at the celebration banquet of 9 regions, when Lu Yi publicly threw out the existence of the Jade Blood Holy Land, the powerhouses of 9 regions vaguely realized a problem. The Jade Blood Holy Land was probably related to the powerhouse from the Jade Blood sect who had stirred up a storm in 9 regions decades ago. They weren't fools. Since the old seniors like Jianghu Hong, Meng Jie, and Yu Ji could settle down in the blood refining world, then there was no reason why Feng Wujiang, who had dominated the world decades ago, couldn't do the same. It was just that at that time, everyone was immersed in the joy and anticipation of Lu Ye's subsequent announcement of the upper realms, so no one asked this inappropriate question and subconsciously ignored it. Now that they looked at it, it was indeed so. The Holy Lord of the Jade Blood Holy Land was Feng Wujiang. Otherwise, how could the only pure land of the human race in the blood-refining world be named Jade Blood? When Feng Wujiang first established the Jade Blood Holy Land, he probably didn't expect such a situation to occur. Otherwise, he wouldn't have named it Jade Blood. There was a high chance that it would become the Holy Land of 9 regions. At this point, there was no need to care about anything. After all, it was just a title. The Divine Sea Realm cultivators were keen to participate in this expedition because it was related to their upper realms. The cultivators below the Divine Sea Realm were keen to participate in this expedition because they each had their own needs. Feng Wujiang had enmity with many of the major sects in the Myriad Devil Ridge. Under his command, the Grand Sky Alliance had the tendency to unify the 9 prefectures. Many of the major sects in the Myriad Devil Ridge had been crippled. If it was any other occasion or environment, they would not be happy to meet each other. But after all, this was the blood-refining world, and they had won a great battle. There were some things that didn't need to be mentioned too much. Compared to the future of the entire 9 regions and the future of the Divine Sea Realm cultivators, the past grievances had been reduced a lot. It wasn't that they could forget their grudges just like that. Grudges weren't something that could be easily forgotten. The 2 factions had been at odds with each other for so many years, and there were countless grudges between them. If they really wanted to settle old scores, every sect present here would have to bear a blood feud. But under the general trend of the insect tide, the 2 camps could still stop and make peace. When the expedition to the blood-refining world, they could even cooperate sincerely. At different times, at different stages, cultivators had different demands. At present, in 9 regions, although the 2 camps didn't explicitly agree on anything, there was already a hidden intention. That was, the situation in the Spirit Stream battlefield and the Cloud River battlefield would remain unchanged, and these low-level cultivators would fight for them. After all, cultivators could only grow better if they fought for it. When they reached the Cloud River battlefield, they would fight for what they needed, but they didn't have to adhere to the camp distinction anymore. There would probably not be a situation like before where every camp was an enemy. In the future, there might be a situation where the low-level cultivators fought until their heads bled, while the high-level cultivators drank and talked merrily. This didn't seem to be too strange. The emergence of the 2 camps was the natural result of the evolution of 9 regions' cultivation history. Now that 9 regions was about to usher in a change, the previous pattern would inevitably be impacted. With such a basic understanding, coupled with the cooperation this time, it wouldn't be too awkward for them to get along with each other. Therefore, overall, this large-scale meeting could be considered successful. During this time, the high-level cultivators also discussed their next move. After this battle, the Blood Kindred army suffered heavy casualties. It would be difficult for the Blood Kindred to form any large-scale resistance in a short period of time. Based on this point, it was not advisable for the cultivators to act as an army. Although the army was powerful, it would be a waste of talent to deal with the Blood Kindred's scattered troops. Therefore, it was better to split up and spread out in all directions. This way, they could quickly and effectively eliminate the Blood Kindred's power and control the entire blood refinement realm as soon as possible. News from the northern region was constantly being transmitted here. It was a good idea to attack the Blood Kindred's gathering point with each sect as a unit. Of course, the strength of each sect varied. For example, sects with Divine Ocean Realm cultivators and above had the qualifications to act alone. Sects with Divine Ocean Realm cultivators and below had the qualifications to act alone. Sects without Divine Ocean Realm cultivators were very risky. Once they encountered a Divine Ocean Realm cultivator, it was very likely that they would suffer heavy losses. Therefore, each sect needed to cooperate with each other. For example, the Jade Blood sect and the Purple Myrtle Dao Palace had teamed up. The 2 sects each had their shortcomings. The Purple Myrtle Dao Palace had no Divine Ocean Realm cultivators, while the Jade Blood sect lacked true Lake Realm cultivators. Of course, this only applied to the locations of the other pillars of Heaven's secrets other than the Shen KC. The armies didn't need to consider this. This was because the armies were made up of elites who were all at the true lake stage and above. When the time came, each divine sea stage cultivator could bring along a group of true lake stage cultivators to form a small mobile team that could act flexibly. Less than a day after destroying the Blood Kindred army, the 9 armies were more or less done. Under the leadership of divine ocean realm cultivators, one army after another charged out of the Holy Island and flew off in different directions. Even the native cultivators of the Holy Island joined them in large numbers. They had been besieged by the Blood Kindred on the Holy Island for decades. Now that they finally had a chance to fight their way out, they naturally didn't want to miss it. Feng Wujiang didn't stop them in the slightest. In less than an hour, the overcrowded Holy Island suddenly became a lot less crowded. Some people stayed behind to guard the island. Feng Wujiang didn't leave. He had to stay behind to guard the island. No matter what, there were still many mortals living here. Qiumin didn't participate in the battle either. This senior sister-in-law had finally reunited with her senior apprentice brother, so she naturally wouldn't leave easily. Compared to accompanying her senior apprentice brother, killing the Blood Kindred for battle merits didn't appeal to her at all. Feng Yuding left, mainly because Li Baxian didn't dare to stay behind. Even though she had already made up her mind before coming, she still didn't know what to say when she saw her senior apprentice brother in person. She could only slightly escape. Lu Yi had been secretly paying attention to this matter. Seeing her senior apprentice brother so worried, she couldn't help him. Outsiders couldn't interfere in this matter. Even if they were like brothers, fourth senior apprentice brother still had to take that step himself. The other cultivators who didn't leave were either injured in the battle or medical cultivators who stayed behind to take care of them. There weren't many people. But now that the Holy Island no longer had to worry about being attacked, it didn't matter even if there weren't many people left behind. Lu Yi found a secluded place and silently refined the holy blood he had collected before while waiting quietly. His biggest role now was to deal with the holy seeds. Not only did he have to deal with the holy seeds that had escaped, but he also had to deal with the other holy seeds that were scattered all over the blood-refining realm. With the suppression of bloodline and holy nature, as long as he took action, the holy seeds would most likely die. So he had to guard the place with the heaven's secret pillars. As long as there was news of a holy seed, he had to rush over immediately. Fortunately, he had a clone. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to handle it. Yi Futian's doppelganger had already killed 3 holy seeds. During the few days of the battle at the Holy Gate Sea, news came from 2 more locations. Yi Futian's doppelganger hurried over to meet up with the nearby Spirit Sea realm cultivators to kill the holy seeds. But because they didn't have a top expert like Jianghu Hong, their efficiency was much lower. Chapter 1174. The current situation in the blood-refining realm was just as Lu Yi had expected. The 9 states cultivator army had taken advantage of the heaven's fate pillars to scatter flowers in the blood-refining realm, catching the blood race off guard. In the process of killing the blood race, many cultivators of the 9 states had also received the task of collecting spirit rice and guarding the human race's gathering place. These 2 tasks could be completed at the same time because if they wanted to collect spirit rice, they had to find the human race's gathering place. Of course, relatively speaking, guarding the human race would take a certain amount of time before the 9 states took complete control of the blood-refining realm. They had to guard it all the time. The cultivators of the 9 states did not reject this task because in the philosophy of the native cultivators of the 9 states, it was the duty of cultivators to protect the mortals. No one would be stingy to contribute their strength under the premise that it was within their ability. Therefore, even if there was no such task, when the cultivators of the 9 states realized that the fleeing blood race might cause casualties in the human race's villages, they would arrange for people to stand guard. Now that there was a task directly issued by the Heaven's Fate Pillars, they would be able to obtain additional merit points, which could be considered as compensation for the cultivators who carried out this type of task. A large amount of spirit rice was collected and sent back to the 9 states through the Heaven's Fate Pillars. Everything was proceeding in an orderly manner. Lu Yi had already left the Holy Island and was wandering around the blood-refining realm. Fortunately, The cultivators of the 9 states could transmit information easily. Now, everyone knew that once they found traces of the holy seed, they should immediately send a message. It would not be long before Lu Yi would descend from the heavens to deal with it. Previously, there were cultivators of the divine ocean realm from the 9 states who did not believe in heresy and gathered a group of people to encircle and annihilate the holy seed. However, after a great battle, they were unable to do anything to the holy seed. On the contrary, they suffered considerable losses. Only then did they understand that the holy seed could not be dealt with by numbers alone. And Lu Yi of the Blue Blood sect was the trump card of the 9 states against the holy seed. When this news was completely spread, Lu Ye's main body and clone were completely occupied. For a time, they were either killing holy seeds or on the way to kill them. Fortunately, there was a limit to the number of holy seeds in the blood-refining realm, so this kind of busyness would not last long. As he busied himself, his cultivation broke through to the 6th-order Divine Sea realm. Since breaking through to the 5th-order Divine Sea realm that day, Lu Yi had been cultivating diligently for some time, but he was still some distance away from breaking through to the 6th order. Although the blood-refining world did not have the same cultivation environment as the 9 provinces, and there was no way to use the Golden Spirit tag, in the process of refining the saint blood, what Lu Yi obtained was not just an enhancement of his saint attribute. Every drop of saint blood contained a huge amount of energy, so while refining the saint blood, Lu Yi was also cultivating. Breaking through to the 6th order like this was only natural. With the increase of one level, his strength would increase, and it would be easier for him to deal with the saint seed. Compared to the cultivators of the 9 regions who were attacking separately, the vampires were constantly gathering. Their transmission of news was indeed not as convenient as that of the cultivators of 9 regions, but they were not fools after all. In the beginning, they were caught off guard by the cultivators of 9 regions, and after losing their strongholds, those lucky enough to escape spread the news that they were attacked. Although they still did not know what was going on, it was a fact that there was a human force that was strangling the vampires everywhere. Moreover, this human force was unprecedentedly strong, which forced the remaining vampires to gather together and hope to resist. As a result, the vampires in the Blessed Enclave all gathered towards the strongest vampires in their respective territories, especially the holy lands where the saint seeds were. There was almost no need to say anything, as many vampires came to join them. This abnormal situation was quickly investigated by the cultivators of 9 regions, and the news was immediately spread. With no other choice, the cultivators of 9 regions could only join forces on a small scale. The cultivators of each sect gathered in one place and fought the vampires back and forth. However, under normal circumstances, such a stalemate would not last long, because as the news spread, more and more sects of 9 regions would join in, until the vampires were completely unable to contend against them. After this battle, the vampires would scatter and look for targets. If they found a sufficiently strong target, they would send a message to gather people and fight the cultivators of 9 regions. To say that this was a very normal operation, but for the vampires, it was very uncomfortable. Even if they could gain the upper hand for a while, the humans would be able to gather enough people to turn the situation around. Almost all the places in the blood refinement realm were in the same situation. What was especially noteworthy was that as time passed, this situation would change. Yingyi and Jianfu won the situation would become more and more serious. Because in the southern territory, the 9 great elite armies of 9 regions were disbanded. They quickly headed north and wiped out all the demons and monsters they encountered along the way. In fact, after the previous battle, the vampires in the southern territory of the blood refinement realm who had some strength were almost all dead. There were not many vampires left in the various strongholds. Facing the teams of the 9 great elite armies, they had no ability to resist. When the elites of the 9 great elite armies swept the entire blood refinement realm from the south to the north, it would be the time of the 9 regions expedition to the blood refinement realm. Perhaps they did not have to wait until that day. The Monolith Sacred Ground was a famous place in the Cloud Radish Plain. The owner of this place, the Monolith Sacred Ground, was an extremely senior existence among the vampires' Saint Venerables. He had been famous for more than 1,000 years. After 1,000 years of operation, the sacred ground's strength was not to be underestimated even during normal times, not to mention the large number of vampires who had recently come from all directions. The current strength of the monolith's sacred ground had increased by more than 3 times compared to normal times. Coupled with the presence of the monolith's sacred ground, it could be said that this was definitely a difficult bone to crack. Even if it was difficult to crack, they had to crack it. There was no reason for the cultivators of 9 regions to turn a blind eye to so many vampires gathered here. Moreover, this time, the cultivators of 9 regions' expedition to the blood refinement realm did not only earn merit by killing enemies, but also by conquering the strongholds of the vampires. Depending on the role the cultivators played in the expedition, the merit earned was different. Therefore, since the beginning of the war, almost every cultivator of 9 regions had gained a lot, and it was not the end yet. It was hard to imagine what kind of harvest the cultivators would gain when the expedition was successful. The only thing that could be foreseen was that after this expedition, the overall strength of the cultivation world of 9 regions would definitely increase by a large margin. At this moment, a large number of cultivators of 9 regions had gathered in a certain direction of the monolith's sacred ground. A group of divine sea realm cultivators had gathered together to discuss and wait. The cultivators gathered here came from a total of 8 sects, all of which were hunting in the nearby tens of thousands of kilometers. When they heard that there was a big fish here, they all rushed over excitedly. The strength of the 8 sects varied. There were 1st grade, 2nd grade, and 3rd grade. As for the sects below the 3rd grade, they basically did not have the qualifications to act independently because they did not have a divine sea realm cultivator. They were usually attached to their own high sects and acted together with their cultivators. Therefore, on the surface, the forces gathered here were the forces of the 8 sects, but in reality, there were far more than the 8 sections. In terms of overall strength, the 9 regions camp had an absolute advantage, but even so, no one dared to act rashly. The only one they were afraid of was the monolith's sacred ground. The cultivators of 9 regions were led by 3 9th grade Divine Sea Realm cultivators. Kucha of Qingwei Sect, Yunlai Tian of Thunder Pavilion, and Leng Mei Shuang of Phoenix Worshipping Pavilion. Among the 3, Leng Mei Shuang was a tall woman with a cold face. She looked quite unapproachable. Among the cultivators, there were fewer female cultivators than male cultivators, and there were even fewer 9th grade cultivators. Leng Mei Shuang did not look very old, but she was already a 9th grade cultivator. It was obvious that her talent was very high. As for Kucha, it was not a name, but a nickname. No one knew what he was called, but he always had a smile on his face, forming a huge contrast with the frosty Leng Mei Shuang. In comparison, Yunlai Tian was much more normal. He was a standard burly man with a fierce bearing. Waiting was torturous, especially when so many cultivators of 9 regions had gathered. It was impossible for the monolith's sacred ground to be unaware, so they had to launch an attack as soon as possible. Otherwise, they would be attacked by the enemy and could only passively defend. They're not here yet? Yunlai Tian was a little impatient. Kucha spread his hands. The message needs to be relayed, so we can't get a definite reply. We only know that they're on the way, but we don't know how long they'll take. They're almost here. Leng Mei Shuang, who had been silent all this time, suddenly spoke. Kucha and Yunlai Tian were puzzled. How do you know? Leng Mei Shuang looked at the 2 like they were idiots. Of course I asked. The 2 were surprised and Kucha asked, You have Lu Ye's mark? When did you get it? Leng Mei Shuang said, I exchanged it with him at the celebration banquet in War Province. That day, there were indeed some people who exchanged their marks with Lu Ye, but there weren't many of them. So, the 2 did not expect that the ice beauty Leng Mei Shuang was among them. The 2 could not help but stare at her, as if they did not expect her to be such a Leng Mei Shuang. Leng Mei Shuang frowned. We're both members of Grand Heaven Alliance, and our sect has some relationship with Blue Blood Sect. As the most outstanding rising star of this generation, what's wrong with me exchanging my mark with him? Kucha hurriedly said, No problem, no problem. Fellow Taoist Leng has the foresight. If he had known that he would need Lu Ye's help today, he would have made the exchange that day as well. This would save him the trouble of relaying the message through others, wasting time and energy, and not getting a timely reply. He made up his mind that when he saw Lu Ye, the first thing he would do would be to exchange his mark. "They're here." Yun Lai Tian suddenly looked in a certain direction, and everyone looked in that direction. Sure enough, there were two streaks of light rushing towards them. That direction was the direction of the nearest pillar of heaven's secrets. Please enter them. Com to view the latest update. Chapter 1175. It was no secret that Lu Yi could teleport to all parts of the blood-refining realm through the heaven's fate pillars. After all, he had been active in a wide range recently, sometimes in the east, sometimes in the west, sometimes in the south, and sometimes in the north. If not for the heaven's fate pillars, it would have been impossible for him to fly to such an extent. Apart from him, there was no other cultivator in 9 regions who had such power. They all lamented that he was indeed worthy of being a person favored by the heavens. The heavens gave him special treatment everywhere. There was no need to be envious. It was precisely because he could teleport with the help of the heaven's fate pillars that he could help the cultivators of the 9 states kill the saint seed. So when they saw the 2 streams of light coming from the direction of the heaven's fate pillars, the spirit sea realm cultivators present knew that Lu Yi had arrived. As for why there were 2 streams of light, no one knew. Soon, the 2 streams of light landed in front of the crowd, revealing 2 figures. One of them was Lu Yi, and the other was a sturdy man with a fierce aura. "You're finally here." Kucha hurriedly led everyone to greet him, looking as if he had been waiting for a long time. Lu Yi was slightly taken aback by his enthusiasm, and it was clear that the other party had considered the way he addressed him. Lu Yi heard most people call him Little Friend Lu. After all, the age gap between them was obvious. The only person who would call him Yi was the sect master. However, he had to admit that such a greeting could easily draw them closer. "I was delayed on the way," Lu Yi replied. "This is..." Kucha looked at the sturdy man and had a faint guess in his heart. He knew that this was one of the seniors that Lu Yi had mentioned before, but he wasn't sure who it was. "Wu Dezhao." Wu Dezhao introduced himself with his hands behind his back, giving off a dignified aura. Kucha and the others thought for a moment and understood this person's background. They hurriedly saluted. Although they were all 9th Order Divine Sea Realm cultivators and were all top figures in the 9 states, they were still lacking in front of a master like Wu Dezhao. They couldn't help but show respect and didn't dare to be disrespectful. Lu Ye's meeting with Wu Dezhao was partly a coincidence, but more importantly, it was Wu Dezhao's own plan. What a crafty person he was. He knew that Lu Yi would keep an eye on the holy seed. Ever since he left the Holy Island that day, he had traveled all the way north, specifically to inquire about the holy seed's whereabouts and whereabouts. He wasn't interested in ordinary blood breeds. He just wanted to kill more holy seeds. However, he knew that it would be difficult to kill holy seeds on his own, so he needed Lu Ye's help. After hearing that there was a holy seed here, he immediately rushed in the direction of the nearest Tianji pillar. As expected, Lu Yi, who had been waiting there for the teleportation, immediately set off with him. Lu Yi naturally welcomed this. With Wu Dezhao's assistance, killing the saint seed would be much easier. "What's the situation now?" asked Lu. He had originally thought that a battle had already broken out. He had rushed over as fast as he could, but now it seemed that neither side was fighting. That was very strange. With so many cultivators from the 9 states gathered here, it was impossible for the blood breeds of the monolith sacred ground to be unaware. Logically speaking, the monolith sacred ground should have taken the initiative to attack long ago. The longer they delayed, the more cultivators from the 9 states would gather, and the more unfavorable the situation would become for the blood breeds. As Kucha explained the situation, he naturally flicked out his own battlefield imprint and exchanged it with Lu Yi. When the other Divine Sea Realm cultivators saw this, they all followed suit. Lu Yi didn't refuse any of them. He had experienced far too many situations like this recently. Every time he went to help and killed the holy seed, there would be a large group of Divine Sea Realm cultivators coming to exchange imprints with him. Something's not right. News from the blood breeds. Lu Yi frowned. No matter how slow the transmission was, they had a rough understanding of the current situation in the blood refinement realm. Hiding like this was extremely disadvantageous for them. What were they waiting for? Were there any other blood breeds nearby? If you're worried that the blood breeds have hidden reinforcements, there's no need for that. We have spies scattered throughout this area. If a large group of blood breeds were to arrive, we'd be the first to know. Wuxia and the others could be considered old Divine Sea Realm cultivators. They were all people who had fought for their entire lives. How could they not have considered Lu Ye's concerns? We suspect that the reason they haven't taken the initiative to attack is because they know the difference in strength between us. They don't dare to act rashly. They're waiting for us to attack so that they can take advantage of the terrain. This explanation was a bit far-fetched, but it seemed to be the only explanation. While they were talking, the monolith's sacred ground, which had been calm all this time, suddenly surged with spiritual energy. Blood breeds filled the air, and a large number of blood breeds charged out. There was also a vast and mighty river of blood spreading out from the inside, sweeping straight towards the place where the cultivators of 9 regions gathered. "Meet the enemy!" Wuxia roared, and the Divine Sea Realm cultivators all rushed towards the monolith's sacred ground. The blood breed's attack came without warning. Fortunately, the 9 states cultivators had been prepared, so they weren't caught off guard. Suddenly, the cultivators on both sides clashed, and the battle was in full swing. "Kid, be careful. They seem to be targeting you," Wu Dezhao warned sternly. Lu Yi nodded. That should be it. It didn't make sense that before he arrived, the blood breeds would attack as soon as he arrived. He had a feeling that the blood breeds were waiting for something. If they weren't waiting for reinforcements, then they were waiting for a certain enemy. A certain enemy that the blood breeds viewed as a great threat. Among all the cultivators in the 9 states, only Lu Yi was worthy of such an honor. However, Lu Yi didn't understand what the blood breeds were relying on. Why did they think they could deal with him here? He had some guesses in his heart, but whether or not he was right, he had to personally verify them. He soared into the sky and rushed towards the huge river of blood with Wu Dezhao. This was the Holy Seed's river of blood. If he wasn't mistaken, it should have been created by the monolith's sacred ground. At this moment, the river of blood was swirling, and some 9 states cultivators were caught in it. Soon, there were mournful screams, and it was obvious that they had been killed. The river of blood danced endlessly. Although there were killings, there weren't many. Instead, there was a sense of provocation. This made Lu Yi even more certain of his guess. The monolith's sacred ground had been biding their time and attacked as soon as he arrived. They must have been waiting for him. There must be a trap in this river of blood for him. If things were really as he thought, then the blood breeds were going to go for wool and come home shorn. Therefore, he rushed into the river of blood without fear, and Wu Dezhao's figure followed closely behind. As soon as he entered the river of blood, Lu Yi felt a strong binding force coming from all directions. He immediately calmed down. It seemed that his guess was right. Outside the river of blood, he couldn't feel much, but once he entered the river of blood, he immediately sensed a familiar aura. It was the aura of one of the holy seeds he had encountered in the battle of Shenkai Sea. The holy seed's holiness was so strong that even he was suppressed. When he sensed that something was wrong, he immediately withdrew from the river of blood with Jianghu and Wu Dezhao. Things happened in a hurry, and the other party didn't react in time, allowing them to escape smoothly. In fact, even if the other party had reacted, it wouldn't have been of much use. Jianghu, Wu Dezhao, and another elder in the river of blood worked together. 3 against 1. They couldn't do anything to the holy seed, but they could keep Lu Yi safe. It was just that once he was trapped in the river of blood, Lu Yi wouldn't be able to kill more holy seeds. At this moment, the one who had appeared on the battlefield was the holy seed with a strong sense of holiness. He obviously knew that the fall of the holy seed had a lot to do with Lu Yi. He also knew that Lu Yi had been hunting holy seeds all over the place recently. So he set up a trap at the monolith's sacred land to lure Lu Yi here. Now that the fish had taken the bait, He learned from his mistakes. The moment Lu Yi entered the river of blood, he activated the binding power of the river of blood. He was confident that with the suppression of his holiness on Lu Yi, he could kill Lu Yi, the holy seed's nemesis. He wasn't the only one in the river of blood. There was another holy seed's aura. It should be the owner of this place, the monolith sacred land. The holy seeds basically didn't work together because their holiness varied. When they fought, it was easy to cause interference between their holiness. One side couldn't use their full strength. This was Lu Ye's understanding of the holy seeds. It wasn't that anyone told him this, but it was his own judgment. But now it seemed that there was a problem with this judgment. At this moment, the monolith sacred land and the holy seed with strong holiness were clearly in a state of cooperation. One was the main and the other was the support. Their holiness fluctuated, forming an extremely mysterious resonance. The strength of the holy seed's holiness in the river of blood surpassed the original level of the holy seed with strong holiness. It wasn't as terrifying as the sum of their holiness, but it was still stronger than the holy seed's original holiness. He suddenly realized that this was what the other party was relying on. This guy's holiness was stronger than his during the battle of the Divine Gate Sea. So he felt that as long as he lured Lu Yi into the river of blood, he would be able to squash him at will. For safety's sake, he didn't hesitate to join forces with the monolith sacred land. Their holiness resonated, and their holiness grew stronger. As long as he killed Lu Yi here, the safety of the remaining holy seeds in the blood refinement realm would be greatly guaranteed. After all, even top experts like Jianghu and Wu Dezhao wouldn't be able to gain the upper hand in a fight against them. Lu Yi couldn't help but sigh. The more he interacted with the blood race, the more he discovered things he hadn't noticed before. He had always thought that it was impossible for the holy seeds to work together, but the truth was that the holy seeds never needed to do so. This method of increasing their holiness was only suitable for the holy seeds to fight among themselves. When fighting against the human race, such cooperation was meaningless. Please enter .com to view the latest update. Chapter 1176. The vampire holy seed's intention was obvious. It wanted to use its holy nature to suppress Lu Yi here. If it had been Lu Yi during the battle of the godly Watchtower Sea, he might have really fallen for the holy seed's trick. After all, his holy nature was indeed inferior to the holy seeds at that time. Now that he was trapped by the blood river, it would be extremely difficult for him to escape. But now, within the river of blood, two figures of the holy seeds of the vampires were using the cover of the blood to attack Lu Yi from the left and right. Their eyes were filled with hatred, and their expressions were resolute. Now, they all knew that the death of the blood refinement realm's holy seed was inextricably linked to Lu Yi. It could be said that this person was the human race's strongest trump card against the holy seeds. In order to eliminate this person, they had planned and waited here, not hesitating to use themselves as bait. The situation had developed as they expected, so all that was left was to kill this human. As long as he was eliminated, the holy seeds would no longer be restrained. To be on the safe side, the two holy seeds attacked together. They only used their blood arts to restrain Wu Dezhao. Suddenly, the two figures swept not far in front of Lu Yi, each reaching out a hand to grab at Lu Yi fiercely. A sudden change occurred. Within the bloody mist, a bloody mist suddenly spread out, turning into a blood river that coiled around Lu Yi like a dragon. The holy seed's powerful holy nature also fluctuated at this moment. In an instant, the two holy seeds' minds became unstable and their blood surged. The holy seed that had encountered Lu Yi in the battle of the godly Watchtower Sea was slightly better. His holy nature was stronger, so in the face of this sudden attack, the suppression was weaker. The monolith holy sage was not so good. His holy nature was only at the average level among all the holy seeds. He had never felt such a violent holy nature in his life. It could be said that this level of holy nature should not exist in this world. No holy seed could accumulate such a high level of holy nature. Under the surging blood, the binding power of the blood river collapsed with a bang. Lu Yi had already unsheathed the Panshan saber at his waist. The saber flashed and directly slashed at the two holy seeds' outstretched arms. Blood splattered, and two miserable screams rang out at the same time. It was as if they had been bitten by a poisonous snake. Their souls were in great pain, and the two holy seeds instinctively retreated almost at the same time. But it was too late. Lu Ye's blood river dragon coiled around them, forming a powerful binding force. The monolith sovereign's face was filled with terror. This sudden turn of events left him at a loss. According to their original plan, they would be able to suppress this strange human's saintly nature. This way, they would be able to join forces to take his life. However, the situation was completely different from what they had expected. The ones being suppressed were actually their two saintly seeds. Now that he was trapped by the other party's blood river, he couldn't break free for the time being. There was even Wu Dezhao, who brazenly charged out from the side, waving his pair of old fists and smashing them on his body again and again. The power of the fist was not fierce. Instead, it gave people a feeling of softness because there was no sound when it was thrown out. In a short instant, who knew how many punches had been thrown? It wasn't until the last punch that the monolith sovereign was sent flying. The monolith sovereign barely managed to regain his balance. The terror on his face had already turned into shock. He stood stiffly on the spot, and with great difficulty, he turned his head in the direction of his companions. As soon as he said this, a series of crackling sounds rang out from his body. It was as if firecrackers had been set off inside his body. The number of sounds that rang out was exactly the same as the number of punches that Wu Dezhao had thrown out. After a series of densely packed sounds, the monolith sovereign's skin suddenly cracked. His entire body seemed to shatter like porcelain, exploding with a loud boom and turning into a cloud of bloody mist. In a flash of light, the monolith sovereign was actually beaten to death by Wu Dezhao, just like that. Wu Dezhao was also rather surprised. This was because he had expected this set of fist techniques to be able to heavily injure his opponent. After all, even if a holy seed's saintly nature was suppressed, his physical strength was still there. He wasn't someone who could be casually killed. He didn't have Jianghu Hong's sharp slashes. However, the monolith sovereign had actually died just like that. Wu Dezhao immediately understood that this wasn't entirely due to his own abilities. Lu Ye's suppressive effect was also present. Lu Ye's suppressive power was probably even stronger than before. Only now did the remaining holy seed come back to his senses. He was both shocked and furious. Impossible! This is absolutely impossible. He had just met Lu Yi in the Battle of the Shunkei Sea. At that time, his saintly nature was stronger than Lu Ye's. How long had it been since then? At most, it had only been a month. In Asian 0000 SI, how could his saintly nature have increased so much? All of his plans were based on the premise that his saintly nature could suppress his enemies. If this premise didn't hold up, then this operation would be a joke. There was no time for him to think any further. After the death of Sacred Sovereign Monarch Boulder, the suppression he felt suddenly became much greater. This was normal. Originally, when he joined forces with Sacred Sovereign Monarch Boulder, the strength he could reach under the resonance of Sacred Sovereign Monarch Boulder exceeded his original level. It was equivalent to him borrowing power from Sacred Sovereign Monarch Boulder. Now that the monolith sovereign was dead, there was no one to borrow power from, and his saintly nature naturally returned to its original level. This saintly nature that could have been the top in the entire blood refinement realm was somewhat inadequate in front of the current Lu Yi. The blood river surged even more fiercely, and even its volume suddenly shrank. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Lu Yi quickly merged his own blood river with the holy seed, mainly because he was afraid that his opponent would escape. If he merged with the blood river, his opponent would have no room to escape. Then, he pounced on his opponent with his blade. Not to be outdone, Wu Dezhao suddenly attacked from the other side. The battle began, and the holy seed was battered and exhausted. In the current situation, even if Lu Yi was alone, he might not be a match for him. At most, he could rely on his powerful physique to contend with Lu Yi for a while, let alone deal with a top-body cultivator like Wu Dezhao. He still stubbornly resisted, but in the end, it was all in vain. After being continuously slashed by Lu Ye's mountain blade several times, he was completely turned into a lamb waiting to be slaughtered. The mountain blade's ability of the soul-severing blade had a miraculous effect when dealing with enemies with powerful physiques. Back then, Saint Sovereign Mohai's soul was shattered just like this, and he died with his eyes wide open. In such a fierce battle, the damage that Lu Yi could cause to him was limited. At most, it would be a wound to his soul, but Wu Dezhao's fists were something that even the Holy Seed did not dare to ignore, especially when he was suppressed. In just a moment, the Holy Seed's chest caved in, and he was covered in blood. His eyes suddenly became resolute, and he stubbornly endured Wu Dezhao's storm-like attacks and rushed in Lu Ye's direction, the aura on his body beginning to become dangerous. When Lu Yi and Wu Dezhao saw this, how could they not know what the Holy Seed was planning? It had to be said that the blood explosion technique was a very disgusting secret technique. It could make vampires choose to self-destruct when they knew that they would die. It was very shameless. Wu Dezhao immediately retreated. Lu Yi, on the other hand, retreated while activating his blood arts, creating a binding force around the blood race's holy seed. Together with the power of the entire blood river, it pressed down on the holy seed. The holy seed's movements became difficult, and in the end, it was difficult for him to move. At this moment, Lu Yi had already retreated to the edge of the blood river. In the next instant, a loud sound rang out, and the entire blood river swelled up before suddenly collapsing back down. Lu Ye's divine sense surged, and he carefully investigated. After confirming that the holy seed's aura was no longer in the blood river, he withdrew the blood river and revealed himself. Wu Dezhao glanced at him, and after confirming that Lu Yi was not missing an arm or a leg, he nodded slightly and rushed toward the fiercest battle. While the two of them were fighting against the Holy Seed, the cultivators of the 9 states and the blood race of the Monolith Holy Land were also clashing head-on. The vampires who gathered here were not only the original vampires of the Rock Holy Land, but also all the vampires in the surrounding tens of thousands of miles. They gathered here to keep each other warm, hoping to resist the attack of the 9 states cultivators, but in the end, it was futile. Once the 2 holy seeds of the blood race died, the rest of the blood race couldn't do anything. Lu Yi rushed out as well. Just like before, he roamed the battlefield and killed enemies on the way. He didn't target his enemies, but he kept a layer of bloody mist around his body at all times. As a result, wherever he went, the strength of the blood race would instantly plummet. A 9th-order Divine Sea Realm blood race might only be able to display the strength of a 5th or 6th-order Divine Sea Realm blood race, while a 2nd-order Divine Sea Realm blood race might only be able to display the strength of a true Lake Realm blood race. As for the blood race below the Spirit Sea Realm, they had truly become soft-footed shrimps. The human cultivators who fought against them only needed to harvest them to their heart's content. This kind of bloodline suppression was something the blood race couldn't contend against. Ever since the blood race was hatched from the blood fetus, their reverence for the holy nature was engraved in their bones. The blood race was a strange race. Compared to the human race, this race had all kinds of advantages that the human race couldn't compare to. They grew quickly and were born with the ability to cultivate. It could be said that almost every blood race member was a natural cultivator. These were all characteristics that the human race envied but didn't have. However, when one of these advantages suddenly turned into a flaw, it would be extremely fatal. The human race was indeed weak. Most of them were ordinary people who couldn't cultivate for their entire lives. Even if they could cultivate, they had to accumulate their strength bit by bit. They were inferior to the blood race in terms of innate advantages, and inferior to the monster race in terms of physique and lifespan, but the human race had the advantage of balance. They didn't have any obvious weaknesses, so it was very difficult to target them. Perhaps some of the human race would be targeted because of their own disadvantages, but the human race as a whole couldn't be targeted with just one method. The fierce battle gradually subsided. Outside the Monolith Holy Land, the corpses of the blood race lay strewn across the ground, their blood converging into a river. When the 2 Saint Masters died in battle, the blood race no longer had the will to fight. Comparatively speaking, The cultivators of the 9 states were in full swing. With the addition of Wu Dezhao and Lu Yi, it was easy for them to wipe out the blood race. Chapter 1177. Strictly speaking, the expedition of the 9 regions cultivation world to the blood refining realm was not a fair war. This was because the 9 regions had already made preparations and deployments, but the blood refining realm was unprepared. Therefore, even if the 2 realms were almost the same in terms of size and level of cultivators, when the war broke out, the blood refining realm was the side that was defeated. Whether it was the battle of the Shenkai Sea or the collision between the cultivators of the 2 races in the blood refining realm, the blood race was at an absolute disadvantage. In the final analysis, there was no such thing as fairness in a war. This was a collision between 2 realms, a struggle between 2 races. The human race had all kinds of advantages in terms of intelligence, and they also had the support of the 9 regions Tianji, so they could be unstoppable. In less than a month since the beginning of the expedition, the blood refining realm's blessed enclave and even the various immortals' caves, as long as the place where the blood race gathered, had basically been wiped out. In the entire blood refining realm, the number of blood race had plummeted by as much as 70%. The blood race who were still alive were all panicked like stray dogs, fleeing and hiding everywhere. In the past, they were as arrogant as they were when facing the human race, but now, they were as miserable as they were miserable. The entire blood refining realm was turned upside down. The escape and hiding of the blood race undoubtedly increased the difficulty of the human race's purge of the blood refining realm, but this situation had long been expected. What the cultivators of the 9 regions needed to do was to search for the traces of the blood race, find them, and kill them to prevent future troubles. After another month, there was no large-scale war in the entire blood refining realm. All the battles that took place were confrontations between small-scale forces. There were injured blood race who wanted to attack the villages where the human race gathered, using blood to replenish their own consumption and recover from their injuries. However, every time they appeared, they would be discovered by the cultivators guarding the various human race villages. Then they would send messages everywhere, and soon, a large number of reinforcements would rush from all over. It could be said that in today's blood refining realm, the blood race was like a rat crossing the street. As long as they dared to show up, they would inevitably be chased and intercepted by the cultivators of the 9 regions. The measure of leaving cultivators to guard the villages of the human race prevented the loss of mortals to a large extent. Before the expedition, the cultivators of the 9 regions didn't expect that this war would be won so easily. They all thought that it would be a fierce battle. But in the overall situation, the largest battle in this expedition was the Shenkai Sea of the Shenkai of the regions. Even that battle was easily won because of a reasonable deployment. After that battle, the 9 armies of the 9 prefectures had set off from the godly Watchtower Sea. Along the way, they had wiped out all the blood tribe members they encountered. It could be said that wherever they went, the situation would be stabilized. Right now, the elites of the 9 great armies had already crossed the twin peaks of the Jade Pillars, and wherever they passed, there was no one who could fight them head-on. The expedition to the blood refinement realm had only been going on for 2 months, but it was already coming to an end. It wouldn't be long before all of the blood race would be exterminated. His existence had been a trump card against the vampire's holy seeds since the beginning of the war. His accomplishments in the past 2 months had been splendid. His main body and his avatar had killed over 100 holy seeds, and wherever he appeared, there would always be a holy seed that would suffer a calamity. How many holy seeds were there in the entire blood refinement realm? Hundreds of holy seeds had died. It could be said that there weren't many holy seeds left. However, at this stage, it was no longer easy for him to hunt down the saint seeds. After 2 months, all the saint seeds that were still alive had sensed his existence, so almost all of them were avoiding him. This made Lu Ye's hunting journey even more difficult. Take the previous situation as an example. When he received the message, he hurriedly rushed to the place where the holy seed appeared. However, the holy seed had already disappeared. There was only a small group of human cultivators who were attacked by the Holy Seed and suffered heavy casualties. The Holy Seeds had learned to be smart. They knew that Lu Yi was their nemesis, so they never stayed in one place for too long, and were in a state of mobile hunting. Now, the 9 regions cultivators were scattered all over the blood refinement realm in small teams or small groups. Even if these teams or small groups had divine ocean realm cultivators, they didn't have much power to fight back after encountering the Holy Seeds. The current situation was like this. It was not easy for the 9 regions cultivators to find traces of the blood refinement realm cultivators, because the blood refinement realm cultivators were almost all killed. Even if there were fish that escaped the net, there were not many of them, and all of them hid very well. But the Holy Seeds wanted to find traces of the 9 regions cultivators, so they could easily find them. With the powerful strength of the Holy Seeds and the premise that there was no top combat strength of the human race, no team could fight against them. And if the Holy Seeds were not eliminated, this expedition could not be considered a complete victory. The deterrence and killing power of the Holy Seeds could not be ignored. Today, Lu Yi received another message. He immediately rushed to the place where the Holy Seeds appeared through the transmission of the Tianji pillar. His speed was very fast, but no matter how fast he couldn't be faster than the Holy Seed slaughter. By the time he arrived at the place, the 9 regions cultivators who were attacked by the Holy Seed had almost been wiped out. Lu Yi saw a bloody light fleeing into the distance from afar. He immediately exploded a drop of essence blood and urged the blood escape technique to chase in the direction of the bloody light, but he could not catch up. The intensity of the Holy Seed's holiness was indeed far inferior to his current strength. Once they confronted him head-on, they would be suppressed by him, causing their strength to drop. But in terms of speed, they were actually about the same. If the Holy Seeds wanted to escape, how could Lu Yi catch up? Unfortunately, the blood escape technique could not be used at the same time as Feng Xing and Fei Yi, so Lu Yi could only follow the fleeing Holy Seeds from afar. After chasing for a while, the Holy Seed suddenly plunged downwards and disappeared without a trace. When Lu Yi came to the place where it disappeared, he found that there was a blood pool there. Lu Yi did not hesitate at all and rushed into the blood pool. Half a day later, his figure emerged from another blood pool thousands of miles away, looking a little helpless. Although he chased into the blood pool immediately, the situation in the blood pool was not suitable for tracking the enemy, so there was no way to find the whereabouts of the Holy Seeds. After searching for a while in the underground blood river, he could only give up in the end. This time, the pursuit ended in failure again. He actually knew where the Holy Seeds had been hiding recently. It was none other than the underground blood river. In the blood refining world, as the entrance and exit of the underground blood river, blood pools were everywhere, and the Holy Seeds had the ability to freely enter and exit the underground blood river. They only needed to hide in the underground blood river, and no matter how powerful he was, he could not find them. Things became troublesome. Lu Yi did not expect that the biggest difficulty in this war would be these Holy Seeds. He had to think of a way to contain these Holy Seeds, but in the current situation, he really did not have any good ideas. A ray of light suddenly broke through the clouds and poured down. Lu Yi looked up and saw that the thick clouds that had shrouded the sky for 2 months had become a lot thinner. In his position, there was a gap in the clouds, and the sun shone down. Since the day the cultivators of the 9 regions invaded the blood refining world and Little 9 fought with the will of heaven and earth of the blood refining world, the sky above the blood refining world had been covered by dark clouds and thunder. It had been like this for 2 months, until today. There were some changes. This was obviously the manifestation of Little 9's absolute upper hand in the confrontation with the will of heaven and earth of the blood refining world. Perhaps it would not be long before the dark clouds in the sky dissipated. This was a good thing. This level of battle was very mysterious and could not be intervened by human power. In fact, no one knew how the will of heaven and earth fought. The most intuitive result was that the will of heaven and earth of the blood refining world could not send down heavenly punishment to the invading cultivators of the 9 regions, which meant that in the battle, the will of heaven and earth of the blood-refining world was in a state of suppression. Just as Lu Yi looked up at the light shining down from the sky, thinking about how to deal with the remaining holy seeds, a mysterious feeling suddenly appeared in his heart. This feeling came inexplicably and without any warning, which made Lu Yi quite confused. But soon he noticed the abnormality, because not only did his original body have a feeling, even his doppelganger also had a feeling. Following this feeling, it seemed to be pointing to a direction. Somehow, there seemed to be some kind of power guiding him to that direction. Lu Yi could not help but be vigilant. If he was in the 9 regions, there was a high probability that such a mysterious feeling was the guidance of the will of heaven, but this was the blood-refining world, so this kind of feeling was somewhat unusual. He hesitated for a moment, raised his hand and pointed at the battlefield mark, softly calling Little Nine. After getting a response, he told Little Nine what happened and asked about the situation. Little Nine responded, "If I were to find you, I would use the battlefield mark, not such a vague method." Then the situation now is, since you have guessed, why ask me? 1. 00 Lu Yi understood that this feeling was sent down by the will of heaven and earth of the blood-refining world. In other words, the will of heaven and earth of the blood-refining world was guiding him. Lu Yi was really confused now. It was not a problem for the will of heaven and earth of the blood-refining world to send down this vague guidance. After all, the will of heaven and earth of this world was not strong and clear enough, so it could not directly communicate with people like Little Nine. It could only use this seemingly mysterious but actually helpless method, which could also be seen as an instinctive response of the will of heaven and earth of the blood-refining world. But the key question was, he was a human. What did the will of heaven and earth of the blood-refining world mean by sending him this guidance? Even his doppelganger could feel it. Just as he was thinking hard, there was a sudden movement from the battlefield mark. He quickly checked and found that it was a message from his second senior sister. "There is a situation," Lu Yi quickly said, instinctively thinking that his second senior sister had found traces of the holy seed. As he spoke, he began to move, rushing towards the nearest pillar of heaven and earth. Junior sister Lan sensed something here, which seems to be pointing in a certain direction. She is not sure what is going on, so she asked me to ask you. Please enter them. Chapter 1178. A moment later, Lu Yi ended the communication with his second senior sister and stood in place thoughtfully. When the sun broke through the clouds and sprinkled the first ray of sunlight in this domain after 2 months, the will of heaven and earth of the blood refinement realm gave a hint of guidance to his original body, avatar, and even Lan Qiyu. What was certain was that whether it was his original body, avatar, or Lan Qiyu, they all felt the guidance pointing in the same direction. This matter was very thought-provoking. Creatures had the instinct to survive, and so did the will of heaven and earth. The will of heaven and earth of the blood refinement realm was far less clear and strong than Little Nine, so even if it had the advantage of home ground, it was suppressed by Little Nine everywhere in the battle, unable to send down the heavenly punishment to the 9 regions cultivators who invaded this realm. Today, this suppression had undoubtedly become more thorough because the dark clouds that showed the heavenly might of this realm were no longer complete. If the situation continued like this, the will of heaven and earth of the blood refinement realm would inevitably be unable to make any waves and would eventually be eaten by Little Nine. So it instinctively sought change, and the guidance of this trace lake was its way of seeking change. It wanted to use the creatures of this realm to make a final resistance. The target was the holy seeds of the blood refinement realm. Because the will of heaven and earth of this realm was not clear enough, there was no way to distinguish between friend and foe, and could only give this guidance to all creatures with holy nature. This was also his original body, avatar, and even Lan Qiyu, the source of time sensing. In other words, he and Lan Qiyu could sense it, and so could the holy seeds of the blood kindred. The realm had undergone a great change, and the holy seeds were on the verge of extinction. Once the holy seeds sensed this guidance, they would naturally make the appropriate choice. Lu Ye's thoughts gradually became clear, and he faintly saw the truth of the matter. He raised his hand and tapped on the battlefield imprint, and hurriedly sent a message in all directions. At the same time, he flew forward according to the feeling in his heart. Recently, he had been worried about how to smoothly deal with the remaining holy seeds. He had never had a good idea because once the holy seeds hid in the underground blood river, they would be in a situation where they could not be found. There were many times when he chased the holy seeds to the blood pool, but in the end, he lost track of them. Who would have thought that someone would send him a pillow just as he was about to doze off? The guidance of the mold lake from the blood refinement realm's will of heaven and earth came at the right time. This time, he did not use the Tianji pillar to teleport because he was not sure where the end point of the Mo lake was. Therefore, he could only fly over. For the sake of rushing to his destination as soon as possible, he didn't hesitate to explode his blood essence to execute blood flight. Of course, this state couldn't be maintained for long. Even though he had quite a bit of blood essence in reserve, blood flight didn't just consume blood essence, it consumed his own reserves as well. At the same time, in various parts of the blood refining realm, the top experts of the human race who were searching for traces of the remaining saint seeds also left their positions and gathered towards Lu Ye's location after receiving the news. This flight took a full 10 days before Lu Ye finally reached the end of the journey. The summit of Yuzhu Peak, as one of the two highest peaks in the blood refinement realm, Yuzhu Peak's existence was very distinctive and not difficult to find. Its location was 1/3 of the blood refinement realm from the north to the south. If one looked down from the sky, Yuzhu Peak was on the right side of the entire realm's centerline. This place was cold and windy all year round and covered in snow. The environment was so harsh that even the blood race didn't dare to set foot in it easily. When Lu Ye set off from the north to the south, he had crossed the towering sky peak and had never come to Yuzhu Peak. When he was 1,000 miles away from this place, Lu Ye had already constructed the concealment and aura concealment spiritual inscriptions to support himself. The journey was silent. He slowly made his way to the summit. When he finally reached the summit, he fixed his eyes and immediately confirmed that his previous guess was correct. The guidance given by the will of the blood refinement realm was indeed targeted at all the holy seeds. At this time, there were already 3 holy seeds gathered together. At this moment, they were standing together and their divine thoughts were frequently surging. It was unknown what they were communicating with each other. Lu Ye didn't show up rashly. This was a good opportunity to catch all the remaining holy seeds in one fell swoop. Now, under his guidance, the top experts of the 9 regions were gathering here. Before the inescapable net was formed and the holy seeds had not gathered, it was naturally not good to alert the enemy. The will of the blood refinement realm did not have intelligence. It only gave the guidance out of a survival instinct, so it would never have thought that its guidance would bring disaster to the remaining holy seeds. Lu Ye hid his figure and restrained his aura. After looking around for a while, he approached in one direction. The entire summit was covered in thick snow, except for one place, where the blood pool was. There was a blood pool at the top of Jade Pillar Peak. Moreover, the size of this blood pool was larger than all the blood pools Lu Ye had seen before. Inside the blood pool, there was a thick stench of blood that pervaded the air. He stopped 100 feet away from the blood pool and completely went into hibernation. The reason why he chose this position was naturally to cut off the holy seeds' escape route. Now, the holy seeds like to hide in the underground blood river, making it difficult for him to find them easily. If the plan here went well enough, the location of the blood pool would inevitably become the first place for the holy seeds to escape. At that time, he would need to block this blood pool and cut off the holy seeds' escape route. Before going into hibernation, he sent out an accurate message to the outside world for the last time. Time passed and snow fell. There were continuous sounds of breaking through the air from all directions. They were the holy seeds rushing over from all directions. There were even holy seeds that emerged directly from the underground blood river and appeared in the blood pool. Lu Ye observed silently and was secretly surprised because he found that the number of holy seeds that were still alive in the blood refinement realm was more than he expected. He originally thought that there were at most a dozen holy seeds remaining, or perhaps even fewer. In fact, there were already nearly 20 holy seeds gathered here, And this was obviously not all of them. With so many holy seeds gathered here, the scene was extremely shocking because the holy seeds would not meet each other easily. Of course, this was except when they were besieging the Jade Blood Holy Land. With so many holy seeds gathered in one place, if a fight broke out, Lu Yi might not even need to show up. Their holiness would interfere with each other. When that happened, only the holy seed with the strongest holiness wouldn't be affected. The other holy seed's powers would be reduced. More holy seeds gathered one after another, but there were not many of them. These holy seeds had undoubtedly rushed over from farther places. They gathered together and communicated with each other to find out the truth of the guidance, but there was no clue. Lu Yi, who was hiding in the dark, vaguely felt the oppressive atmosphere. He did not know what these holy seeds were waiting for, and he did not know why the will of heaven and earth of the blood refinement realm had gathered them here. Other than the guidance he had sensed at the beginning, he did not sense anything else. This was the same for the holy seeds gathered here. They were all guided to gather here, but no one could say for sure why they were here. Lu Yi continued to lie dormant. Through his communication with the outside world, he had confirmed that the top experts of the human clan were nearby and ready to fight. They could attack at any time. However, the holy seeds began to argue. They had been discussing the truth of the guidance. They thought that the other holy seeds would know something, but they were all confused. Some holy seeds felt that since it was a mysterious guidance, they should continue to wait. As long as they waited, they would naturally understand. However, some holy seeds felt that it was not safe for everyone to gather here for too long. The human clan had a holy seeds nemesis. If he discovered the situation here, no one would be able to escape. Naturally, they should not continue to wait. More holy seeds remained silent. They did not express their opinions and only listened. As a result, the scene became lively. Amid the noise, some holy seeds began to move, but it was not to the extent of fighting. Now, the holy seeds knew that there were not many blood race survivors in the blood refinement realm. These holy seeds were probably the last hope of the blood race. If they wanted to continue living, it would not be good to have any disputes. Amidst the noise, Lu Yi could not stand it anymore and sent out a message. At this time, all the holy seeds should have arrived. Even if there are a few holy seeds further away, there shouldn't be many of them. The encirclement has been formed. As long as these holy seeds are destroyed here, the overall situation of this expedition can be set. A long delay may lead to many dreams. Naturally, it is not wise to continue waiting. Not long after the message was sent out, powerful and condensed auras flew over from all directions. The holy seeds noticed it immediately and looked around in panic. Their faces changed in an instant. "It's a trap!" a holy seed exclaimed. Judging from the auras they sensed, the number of masters dispatched by the human race this time was more than 100. Not only did it include the top seniors, but there were also Ninth Order masters who rushed over after receiving the news. This was a battle against the holy seeds. Cultivators below the Ninth Order realm were not qualified to participate. Therefore, judging from the lineup, the hundreds of people from the 9 provinces were all Ninth Order masters. It was just that their strength varied. Such a powerful force was enough to destroy the holy seeds gathered here. The holy seeds were both shocked and angry. They never thought that they would fall into a trap after being guided here by some unknown force. This was completely unreasonable. The world will of the blood refinement realm must have come down to guide them. How could the world will of the blood refinement realm be an accomplice of the human race? They could not understand it, but they did not have the time to think about it. They were not afraid of ordinary human race cultivators. They could even contend with those top masters. What they were afraid of was the holy seeds nemesis. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Immortal Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.